Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday edition of Point of View, and we're going to be covering, as you might imagine, lots of different topics, some of those in front of the Supreme Court, some having to do with the military. We're also going to talk about whether or not this Build Back Better bill is going to go anywhere. A piece from the Washington Post, also a commentary by George Will, and those are just a few topics that we will be addressing today. And we are privileged to have back in the studio Penna Dexter. We've missed you, and so grateful to have you back in the studio.
Well, I'd like to say Merry Christmas to everyone, and you're actually probably not going to have to pay as taxpayers about $5 trillion at least this year for Build Back Better.
Well, that, I think, is good news right off the bat. We also, of course, have Jeremy Dice, who is the Special Counsel for Litigation and Communications at First Liberty, and we're going to spend some time talking about some of these First Liberty cases. So great to have you here.
Well, good to be back, and Merry Christmas.
For the first issue, let's start military, and there are a couple aspects. Let's first of all talk about shields of faith. That is something we have not talked about. Unless you are actually getting some of the material from First Liberty, this may be new to you. So you can find some of that by going to firstliberty.org. Mike Berry's done a very good job with the video, and there's some other things involved with that. But explain what's going on right now.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with Shields of Faith, it is a company that builds replica dog tags. So those identifying pieces of metal that hang around our military members' necks during times of war and otherwise, just to identify them. They sell these replica dog tags. Excuse me. They sell these dog tags that allow people to have. On one side is the seal for that particular branch. Think the globe and anchor for the Marine Corps and that sort of thing. And on the back side is a word of inspiration, usually from the scriptures, and most often from the scriptures to encourage these guys. They've been huge hot sellers because many of our men and women in uniform want to carry those with them, especially when they go into battle. And we've had those opportunities far too often in the past 20 years or so. It really started out of 2001 or so when Sergeant Ripito had this. And President Bush at the time, memorializing and eulogizing Sergeant Ripito, mentioned the dog tag that Ripito's father had given to President Bush. And that became very popular out of that, and it's just spread. Well, the Department of Defense has now responded to a complaint from people who have an axe to grind about religion in the public, especially in the military. And they have made it unlawful for the seals of the branches to appear next to religion, basically. So if you think of the flip side of a coin or whatever, on heads is the seal, and on the tail side is religion, and they've said that violates the law. And we said, no, you violate the law. And in fact, you violate the Constitution. And so this week we filed a lawsuit against DOD saying, hey, you are now violating the Free Exercise Clause, the Establishment Clause, DOD policy. We threw everything in the kitchen sink at them that we could, trademark everything that we could possibly throw at them because they deserve it, right? This is a ridiculous thing to say that you cannot express it, and by expressing it, you're violating the Establishment Clause because of the government property being the logo and all that kind of thing. It's laughably silly to have that be the actual articulated policy of our Department of Defense, who's supposed to be concentrating on what? Killing bad guys, not making sure that dog tags that are voluntarily provided or purchased are somehow running afoul of the Constitution. But this is what we've been brought to.
This sounds strangely like the work of Mikey Weinstein.
Oh, sounds very familiar, huh? Yeah, no,
So he's the one that convinced the
Military Religious
DOD.
Freedom Foundation came behind and said this is they complained loud enough, long enough, and often enough that the DOD believed it. And so we've really tried diligently to avoid litigation on this. And we've gone to DOD. We've sent multiple letters. We've tried to settle things that we possibly could. It won't happen. And so now the only result that we have is on behalf of Shields of Strength, the company that makes this, we have to go to court and insist upon the law being applied to the Department of Defense.
Wow. Let me just real quickly mention that you're also going to be doing something having to do with the SEALs, and that is something we talked about yesterday, just one article here. Nearly 4,000 soldiers refused COVID-19 vaccine, even more airmen and others, and so that's a case we've been following with you, and something's happening next week, isn't it?
Yeah, and it'd be very precise since we used SEALs in one context. English language confuses us because we're not talking about the art kind of SEALs here, nor are we talking about the SEALs like the logos. We're talking about the acronym SEALs. The guys who are what I might call the Olympic athletes of our United States military, the Navy SEALs, these guys who train to do really important things in a very quiet way in any kind of, sea, air, in any environment that they may find themselves in. This vaccine has posed a problem for many members of the SEALs, and the Navy has said about three things. One, if you request a religious accommodation, if you even just request it, you're going to have to turn in your special warfare device, meaning your trident. Yeah. And so you're going to go back to the regular Navy and swab decks. Now, no, that's like LeBron James having to go back to high school and play basketball. That's not going to happen in this situation. Or maybe more appropriately, go to the CBA instead of the NBA. For those who follow this kind of thing, it's not appropriate, not going to happen. Two, you're going to be kicked out of the Navy basically if you don't do this and dishonorably discharged, which is absolutely horrible. They've also required their spouses and families, if they're not vaccinated, that they can't travel. Well, the DOD has a lot of control over our men and women of the armed forces. They don't have control over their families. Those are private citizens, and they can't order their families not to travel. That's ridiculous. And then the worst thing that, in my mind, is that they have threatened these SEALs with the potential of having to reimburse all the dollars that the Navy has invested in them in training them. That's upwards of $2 million on things. And so for someone who would be potentially dishonorably discharged to have to be able to recover that at any time would be almost impossible and would be financially ruinous for these guys. This is how we're rewarding people for simply trying to insist that the law be offered to them to accommodate their faith during this time. We are in such a silly season right now that I'm shocked and continually shocked day by day. But on Monday, to bring this to a fine point, on Monday, we'll be having a hearing in Fort Worth on this issue. We represent 35 Navy SEALs, and we're going to be arguing for an injunction to be applied to the United States military. Now, if you've kept score at home, the OSHA mandate has been enjoined. The Medicaid mandate has been enjoined. The federal contractors mandate has also been enjoined. So the top three mandates from the federal government have all been enjoined. And then now we've got the military. It's kind of the last one standing out there that is yet to be enjoined. My hope is that by Christmas we will have an order from this court enjoining it as well. Let's certainly hope for and pray that way.
When I watched Michael Berry do one of your first Liberty Live episodes on this, he said that he thought this was at root of this was an ideological litmus test, where it was like a way of purging Christians out of the military. So, that says something about the military that's a lot stronger than what I've thought or heard. But do you think so?
Look, it's hard to view it any other way. It's people voluntarily raising their hand saying, I've got a conservative ideology here that doesn't, that at least is willing to push back against an unlawful order, or what is perceived to be an unlawful order, and say, no, I don't want to follow this. And it's also raising hands because the people that are raising hands have a religious objection to this. And so it's only religious people that are raising their hand here. And the military is not right now very friendly to those who are people of faith in the United States military. So, yeah, I think this is very clearly an ideological purge by our armed forces, and that's terrible.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about everything from Magnolia to Maine. And we are privileged to have in studio with us today Penna Dexter, Jeremy Dice. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
We've all heard the phrase, seeing is believing. Unfortunately, that is no longer true due to the technological advances that make deepfakes so convincing. 2 years ago, I wrote about how you could put someone's face on a video the way you can use Photoshop or Lightroom to put a face on a picture of someone's body. In the past, it took cutting-edge video technology to accomplish this. Now it is readily available and can even be purchased on the internet. Michael Grothas writes about this in his book, Trust No One, Inside the World of Deep Fakes. His examples are a reminder that you shouldn't even believe everything you see. This technology can make it look like you commit a crime. This journalist asked a deep fake for hire to put together a clip of him committing a crime and was shocked to see how convincing the video was. He watched himself point a gun at a cyclist and told him to give up his backpack or die. It looked like his video-created self would have killed the man if passerbys had not interrupted. Deepfakes have also been used to make an innocent person appear in porn. Actresses like Addison Rae and Scarlett Johansson have been targeted this way through deepfake technology. Although they have tried to fight back, it seems like a losing battle. Now, some of the deep fakes are harmless. You can see Tom Cruise playing golf on TikTok. You can see Queen Elizabeth dancing and even flying through the air. Videos have been made of Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Boris Johnson, and Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, these videos can be manipulated to have you say or do things you would never say or do in real life. They could easily be used to damage your reputation, and you could even lose your job. Sadly, I must agree with the title, Trust No One. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Once again, it is Weekend Edition. If you'd like to join us at any point, 1-800-351-1212. First two articles have to do with First Liberty, and of course you can go to firstliberty.org. We have some things on COVID cases, which we sort of alluded to, one on Maine, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But Penna, Dexter, Jeremy with us today, and Penna, certainly one of those questions is Magnolia. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. Well, it's about treating churches equally with other organizations by a city. And Jeremy said recently, he didn't want to go to court with the some of the other cases. Well, this one, it looks like they're not going to have to, because you guys have actually agreed with the city of Magnolia, Texas now that they will not treat churches differently.
Yeah, and that's the precise issue here has been just simply treating churches fairly and equally. And the city has refused to do that. So going back a couple of years, the city of Magnolia, Texas, instituted a change to their water fee rate. So they put churches and other nonprofits in one place, they put businesses in another, and it turned out that adjusted the rate pretty significantly for our churches. And by treating them so discriminatorily, they ended up having to cut services to the community, and they didn't want to do that. And so we took them on. We went to law on this whole thing. There's a backstory here also of the city playing a couple shenanigans that we can get into later on. But let's
But this was just religious groups, churches and other religious organizations treated differently, and it was more expensive for them.
That's right, and so they ended up having to cut different services and that sort of thing. And the city has now fought us for about 3 years now. We've had to go up on appeal. We won. We had to come down. We won on summary judgment. And so we're headed towards trial. And thankfully now the city has come back and said, you know what, let's just avoid trial. And we're like, okay, what do you got? I said, we'll put you in the commercial rate with other businesses and treat you fairly like everybody else if you'll just simply dismiss the suit. And we took it to the churches. They said, that's all we've been after. And so the city passed that this week, that they're going to enter this agreement. Next meeting, they'll have to actually vote us into that, the churches into that commercial rate class, and then file that with the court. The court will enter that, we'll dismiss our suit, and we'll go on. So this is really good news for the city of Magnolia, but really even better news for churches everywhere, because there are cities that have been watching this all around the country to see, oh, can we get more money this way? And we've held them at bay, and really, I mean, look, they've had to rack up a whole lot of money for attorney's fees to defend their illegal actions on things. And so if they had won, what that would have meant, not just for churches in the state of Texas, which would have been bad enough, but for churches around the country, is that city councils and county commissions would have used their water rates to concoct some sort of scheme to get more money in lieu of the taxes that the churches don't pay into those coffers. And so thankfully, we've held that attack off here, and I hope into the future well.
You know, the thing that ignores is how much good churches do in a community. Of course, you know, maybe some people don't want to acknowledge that, but if you're just looking at it from a financial point of view, churches do provide a lot of services that perhaps if they didn't provide, the city would be out some money to provide those. So, you know, just financially, it's a smart idea to not treat churches differently and make things more expensive for them.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And then when they call you on the carpet, at least be a little bit respectful of it all. The churches had, to their credit, gone to the city council multiple times. They had participated in the city council meetings. They had sent letters. They had told them, this is not what we want to have happen. Don't do this to us. And if you do, they even sent a letter at the end saying, if you do this, we're going to sue you. And then they passed it. And so we got the litigation ready. In Texas, in order to file a legal challenge using the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act, you have to give 60 days notice to the other side. And so we did. And in that 60 days, knowing that we're going to a lawsuit, the city used a very unique little thing that if you don't read the classified section, you never know about it, because they have to publish this notice in the classifieds of your local paper. You have to find it, and if you object, then you have to go to court in Austin, I might add, to challenge Magnolia is near Houston, not near Austin, which is about 3 hours away. So they'd have to go to there to challenge the legitimacy of that rate. And so when our suit finally went forward, the city came back and said, I'm sorry, we've already had this adjudicated by a court in Austin. It's valid and the rate is fine. And in fact, if you continue this lawsuit, we're going to seek sanctions against your pastors for bringing this lawsuit. And that was the flavor of the litigation thereon. Thankfully, we were able to go back to the court, and we had to dismiss our suit in Magnolia, had to go back to the court in Austin and say, could you reopen that litigation, which is a very difficult thing to do. We succeeded in doing that, thankfully. And then it took an appeal to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Texas and came back down, more discovery, depositions, summary judgment. We win. And now the city finally, after about 3 years, has said, okay, uncle, we give up, put you back in this rate class, and all will be copacetic again.
Another one of those religious liberty victories, you know. Are you getting tired of victories? No, I get tired of winning?
It is.
As they used to
funny.
say.
It's an issue of, it's a very kind of esoteric issue of tax law.
But it could really devastate churches.
Huge devastation of churches everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, these churches some of them have very, very small budgets. And it was really shocking to hear some of the dialogue in the depositions of kind of wondering what churches do. I mean, it's not that bad kind of thing. No, I remember one of our pastors said, you know what, rice and beans may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but if you don't have anything, the provision of rice and beans means a lot. And we've had to stop providing some rice and beans as meals to people. They've gone hungry. They don't have anywhere else to get food. We were it. And that was the decision points coming down for these churches. Do we provide rice and beans to people who are hungry or not? Or we pay our water bill? You can't be just like President Biden and say, we're going to pay our bills on time and sign a debt limit bill that would allow you to pay it at another time. I don't follow that.
Do it.
But
print more money.
The churches certainly wouldn't be afforded that opportunity.
Yeah. Let me pick up just one more before the break. We did talk about this last week, but it's an important one. It takes us to Maine. And first of all, our listeners in Maine are familiar with it. I think some of our listeners last week have heard the fact that you've actually had oral arguments on what I think is going to be another victory for you, because the Nelson family wanted to have their child attend Temple Academy, and they're in Maine, one of the oldest school choice programs in the country, say that, especially if you're in a rural area and you don't have a school, well, we will provide tuition so that you can go to any school except if it's religious.
Or at least if they believe in what
Yes.
they actually teach, right? That's even more remarkable. Yeah, so this program, Maine has made the decision, hey, it's cheaper for us just to give you money than it is to buy it, to build a public school, staff it, and all that.
Sure.
And so they give, I think, something like $11,000 or something like that to parents who are in rural areas to do that. Now, you want to take that $11,000 and send your kid to a $60,000 a year boarding school in Massachusetts? No problem. You want to go to some tawny school in California? Be our guest. If you want to send it to the local private school that teaches secular values, not an issue whatsoever. But if you send that to the local Baptist Christian school that actually believes in what they're teaching and inculcating those values to the next generation, well, that they have too much problems with. And just think about how remarkable this would be. Someone in Augusta, Maine would be responsible at some government bureaucracy, some desk somewhere, to have to look at each school one by one, and not only the school, look at their curriculum and their mission statements and their founding faithful documents and say, okay, well, now this one, they sort of believe it, but not really, so we're going to give them the money. But this one, oh, they actually really believe this crazy stuff, and so we're not going to give them the money. That level of intrusion is should be just shocking to the First Amendment. I think it actually is. And I think some of the justices had their eyes kind of rolled back last week when we were having these arguments up there. Not all. I think there's at least one justice that would be all for this and was sort of cheering it on. But it was shocking to hear the other side say so often that if they're actually inculcating these values to these students, yeah, they would be disqualified. And on top of all that, just really castigate and sort of insult the schools that teach these things and kind of hold them in derision for what they teach. Look, I get it. You don't believe what we believe? Sure. You don't believe what these Christian schools believe? Okay, I understand that. But the opposite of religion in the mind of the left is secularity. But they call that neutrality if you're secular. Well, wait a minute. You can't be both. That's, if one end is positive and the other pole is negative, there's something else in the middle of those two things. Right. And you're calling the negative the good thing and the positive the bad thing. That doesn't make any sense to me. So the neutrality by the government says we welcome everybody, regardless of status, right? If you are religious, you can receive this. Or use, if you're going to use it for religious purposes, that's fine too.
And that's the part that was kind of an interesting debate we talked about last week, because after all, a lot of listeners might say, isn't there a case like Espinoza versus Montana, which we talked about less than 2 years ago, the court ruled on? Well, they were trying to make a distinction between status and use, which I think is a distinction without a difference. It
should be, right? Because it's kind of like the scene from Seinfeld where Jerry gets a rental car, you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to keep it, right? And it's the same kind of thing. You know how not to discriminate on status. You just don't know how to keep it on use.
Well, that's great
you can
illustration.
Have the dollars, you just can't use them for anything.
Jerry Seinfeld metaphor to help you understand. Perfect. I think you're going to win this case hands down, and another victory for First Liberty.
I guess the question is, how narrow will the decision be?
Let's hope it's very narrow, because that's a very good win. Because if it's a small number of justices, 5-4, they've done great things. If it's 9-0, it's probably a little bit more watered down than we'd want.
Good point. We got a lot more to cover, but we encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. We'll come back with more right after this.
Have you ever been in a pitch black room when someone lit a candle? The change from darkness to visibility is instant. But what's even better is when that one small flame is used to light other candles. Before long, a room that was completely dark is radiating with light. That's what happens when you share the truth. Just like that small flame, your light is contagious, and it's needed in America today. Did you know that most Americans still identify as Christians? But here's the scary part. Only 9% of those people actually understand biblical teachings, according to findings by researchers. You could say that America is the dark room. Will you be the person to light a candle? Here's how you can spread that light even farther. When you give to Point of View, you'll equip millions of others with the tools they need to stand for truth. And any gift before December 31st will be matched up to $75,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, it is Weekend Edition, and certainly we encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. First two articles, one on the First Liberty COVID cases and victories, second one on the Maine school choice case, which I think is going to be a victory, but we probably won't find out about that until maybe June. And so we wanted you to know about some of those. But the third article is one, Penna, that you had recommended. Matter of fact, that article and one we'll get to later by George Will, both from the Washington Post, Post, and it relates to something we've encouraged you to do. If you look at our Take Action item, it's still up there about Build Back Better Act in front of the United States Senate. Many of you have actually contacted you two senators, but you're starting to see a lot of people in Washington, D.C., and certainly inside the Beltway saying, I just don't think this bill's going to pass.
Well, even Chuck Schumer, the majority leader in the U.S. Senate, he knows it can't pass this year. He may bring it up next year. But, I'm skeptical because you're getting closer and closer to an election, and I'm just not sure whether that calculus will work. And we'll talk about some of the parts of it. I mean, for months we've been talking about this. It started out as a $3.5 trillion bill. The senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, just said that was way too much, and they've backed it off. But the way they backed it off has been very gimmicky. They've said like a couple of things that expire in 5 years, but, that piece of information's been left out of saying it's now only $1.75 trillion. I think I said billion before. It's trillion. It's a lot of money. And the fact that now this probably helping the cause of it not being passed is inflation. Inflation has resulted from a lot of the money that's been spent for COVID bills. And to add another, and the CBO came back and said, if you really scored this out for 10 years, it'd be more like $5 to $7 trillion. So, adding this much money into the economy is so inflationary, and they're already signaling that inflation may be getting out of control. The Fed says there are going to be 3 rate hikes next year, and there are just so many reasons not to pass this. I mean, in my heart and mind, the biggest reasons is the new entitlements that these bills put out there, and so it should not be passed under reconciliation, which is supposed to be just budgetary. So there are many reasons not to do it. The president has just continue to hold on to this idea. I think he thinks that he's got to go as far left as he can here in the beginning of his presidency. But it's crazy. It's crazy in so many ways, and I'm really glad. And even as the Washington Post's Henry Olson, who's somewhat of a moderate columnist there, says it's time to entertain the possibility that the Build Back Better bill won't pass, and not just won't pass this year. I think it just won't pass. And, that should be our hope for the good of the country.
Any comments? Yeah, no, exactly. And then let's give a very big pat on the back to Joe Manchin,
yes,
who that back has withered a whole lot of criticism on standing firm on all this. But look, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. And I know I made a glib remark earlier about President Trump, signing that America pays its bills on time as he signs the debt limit increase that allows him to pay the bills later. I just don't understand that. But we've got a great thing here with Senator Manchin saying, you know what, I'm not going to budge. And look, he could very easily have budged on this whole thing. I don't think people truthfully fully appreciate how much courage it frankly takes to do that. Senator Sinema, I think she deserves a little bit of credit as well for having similarly made some comments along the way, but really the focus has been withering on Senator Manchin, and good on him for standing strong on this issue.
And again, we've just talked about the dollars. This was something that you had John Cornyn and others in the Senate say, wait a minute, enough gimmickry here. We want the Congressional Budget Office to not just read the law, and just be limited by these gimmicks, but recognize that once you implement a particular program or entitlement, and there are quite a number of entitlements in there, they're never going to be withdrawn. The closest thing to eternal life, former President Ronald Reagan used to say, is a government program. And so once they did that, you're coming up with $5 trillion. And back to the point that we were making in terms of the dollars, that's bad enough, given the fact that inflation is still going to go up because the consumer price index is high, but the producer price index is even higher, saying next month it's going to be higher. I'll predict that is the case. But then, Penna, when we encourage people to actually contact their senators, we gave them a list of some really really toxic things in this bill, put as entitlements, put as ways to help families, a lot of it having to do with the whole issue of fighting climate change. And how's that been working for us when we've actually allocated that for Solyndra and a variety of others? So there were a lot of reasons to be against the bill. And let's give credit where credit is due, that at least one Democrat, Joe Manchin, and one or two others were a little bit hesitant. But it's amazing to me that a piece of legislation like this, that has so much wrong with it, got as far as it did.
It is amazing, and I have a feeling that there are some other senators that are breathing a sigh of relief and that owe a lot to Joe Manchin, who put himself out there for this, to take the slings and arrows, but others would rather not vote for something as transformational as this. And I mean, just one of them, when you think about the energy side of it and, getting rid of fossil fuels, or at least trying to diminish the use of them. There was a point made today in the Wall Street Journal. The world consumed about 25% more natural gas in 2019 than in 1997 when the Kyoto Protocols were signed. So, how much good does a lot of these policies that are quote unquote supposed to help us reduce global warming or pollution or whatever? Most of the policies are more for control and sort of economic, authoritarianism over people than they are for really doing something about the environment. And then just about the gimmicks. I mean, here's just one big example. The child tax credit, which was increased for COVID and was supposed to be temporary. And in this bill, it's made, not permanent. It's extended a year. But the way that they speak about it, you find out that you can never take something like that that's so helpful to certain people. You can't really stop having that. So when they went out and scored how much a child tax credit increase that was supposed to expire next year, but it won't, will cost us over 10 years. Those types of dollars helped, I think, bring the figure up to $5 to $7 trillion. And I think this is probably the straw that broke the camel's back that's caused everyone to say this thing is just not possible. Good riddance. It's not totally gone yet, but I think it's on its way out.
The other day we did talk about inflation. Since we brought it up just before the break, I thought we'd get into that. And I put up a chart that I took from the Federal Reserve so that it's accurate. And it showed actually the indebtedness of America. And then I superimposed it on the GDP. And what you see is from 1971, when we went off the gold standard and then allowed people to print more money than we had goods and services for, you see that those numbers and those lines diverging more and more. And again, some people say, well, you're just blaming Biden. No, I mean, you can see that whether you had a Republican president or a Democratic president, whether you had a Republican-controlled Congress or a Democratic-controlled Congress, they go up. Now, to be fair, sometimes it goes up maybe not as steeply sometimes when you have Republicans in Congress. But, the only dip you saw happened in 2020 because of what? The pandemic. But other than that, it continues to go up. And you and I have grandchildren, and of course, Jeremy has children, and I am just appalled at the lack of interest on how this is going to affect our children and grandchildren in the future.
It will affect them, and that you have these senators sitting around in these commodious offices just doing nothing of the sort, not understanding the hard times that are in little town West Virginia, in the middle of nowhere. It's difficult for them it's sometimes hard for us to remember they don't see you that often. And so it's good that people have pointed this out. The family budget is something that our senators don't often have to deal with. And it's clear that that's the case. You can't simply continue to throw money at problems all the time. It will not always solve the situation. We will run out at some point, and further, we will become enslaved to those who are our creditors. And Scripture is very clear on that point, right? So it's good for us as a nation to remember it's a national security issue to have too much debt on our side of the ledger here. And then we haven't even begun to touch all the social programming things that are within this entire bill. I mean, if you thought that the fall of CRT and BLM and all these things that went on in Virginia in these city count or these school boards were something, just wait until Bill Becker. I can't even say it, comes to light. It's going to be even worse than all that.
And as you said, Proverbs 22:7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a servant of the lender. Probably a better translation, a slave of the lender. We've enslaved the future generation because of our profligate spending. We need to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
The Institute for Family Studies and the Wheatley Foundation published a report about Americans' attitudes regarding marriage and child-rearing. Its title is The Divided State of Our Union, Family Formation in Post-COVID-19 America. It shows the desire to marry has ticked up a bit overall since the onset of COVID, while the desire to have a child dropped. But the study reveals deepening economic, religious, and partisan divides in family formation, and describes the reasons the rich, the religious, and Republicans have a relatively greater propensity to marry than lower-income, less religious Americans. Downward trends in divorce, teen pregnancy, and abortion rates continue, but there's a certain disturbing disengagement behind some of this. Fewer marriages translate to fewer divorces. Teen sex, pregnancy, and abortion happily are down, but so is teen dating. Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute explains that contemporary social science, including this report, reveals a change in the basic character of social breakdown in America. For generations, the core problem has been Americans living their lives out of order, having sex too soon, becoming parents too early, without restraint or preparation. He calls these pathologies of unruliness. We have added another pathology, disordered passivity. In an article at the Dispatch, Yuval Levin writes, "There is less social disorder, we might say, because there is less social life. We are doing less of everything together, so that what we do is a little more tidy and controlled. Our society possesses institutions of restraint on our impulses. Marriage channels and domesticates human longings. Now we must ask, what if we fail to act on our longings to begin with? Many young people are risk-averse, waiting too long, maybe forever, to get on with it. A terrible result is the decline of marriage and the decline of childbearing. The church must speak into this passivity. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Right, once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Jeremy Dice. And let me just mention that as we are getting closer to year end, we won't be broadcasting this time next week. It'll be Christmas Eve. I thought nobody wants to come in the studio then. But the week after, we will kind of do a year in review. And this piece that we have posted, it's our fourth article by George Will, just kind of reminds us of what a really bad year it's been for President Biden. One that I can allude to, we just mentioned a minute ago, Jeremy was talking about these various court cases. We did just the other day kind of a COVID test. You know, we right now are going to be doing a Christmas quiz, and we did a COVID quiz talking about how many people die every day of COVID. 1,000 a day. Most people wouldn't know that because the press isn't covering it. One of the questions on our COVID quiz is, how many of these lawsuits has Joe Biden lost? All of them. So, you know, this has not been a good year on all sorts of different issues, but let's start with the obvious one. The Build Back Better Act is probably not going to pass. And if Joe Biden and the Democratic Party go into 2020 with the election wanting to point to some successes, Penna, that's a little difficult.
He shouldn't be shocked, and those advising him shouldn't be shocked. I mean, you mentioned the lawsuits having to do with the vaccine mandates. All of them are unconstitutional, and pretty much obviously so. He even admitted with the OSHA one that it probably wasn't, but we're going to do it anyway. And I think this is the way the left operates a lot of the time. They go ahead with something, and then they can use it to criticize their enemies, to present them as uncompassionate, as anti-science. So that is what they've tried to do, and I think some people buy into it, but a lot haven't. And I think they may be surprised at how many haven't. So how much that has actually hurt them. Build Back Better is also, I mean, it's so bad. It's so much of an overreach. The George Will piece says it's the everything, including the kitchen sink process that has produced it, has completed the collapse of Biden's credibility and his party's. And, there's something for every constituency in there. And there were a few things in the George Will article, and you can go and see it at pointofview.net, that shocked me. I didn't even know about. One of them is the first one that he mentions, a $1.7 billion payroll tax credit of up to $25,000 for each local journalist and that an organization employs in the first year. So, for journalists that, if you hire journalists, if you're a media organization, you get you get a tax credit of $25,000 for each one. I mean, talk about bribing your news coverage. And then no tax increase. Okay, he promised no tax increase for anyone making less than $400,000. That's turned out to be a big lie. Number one, there are corporate tax increases in here. And when a corporation gets its taxes raised on it, it's always passed on to the consumer. And then another part of this is Donald Trump's tax cut bill, actually raised taxes in a sense and limited the deduction you could take for property taxes. So in high tax, high property value states, the rich people, they lost one of their benefits, and Biden wants to give it back, and it's very, very expensive. And it means that all the low tax states like Texas and Florida will be paying for the prolific spending in some of these blue states. So those are a couple of things. There's a lot in here. Some of the entitlements, for instance, the daycare entitlement, something, we fought about daycare for decades, since Nixon. And we've never had a national daycare system. But, of course, that's in here, in a sense. Universal preschool. There's expansions of Medicare to make Medicare pay for many more things. And it's already set to go broke in 3 or 4 years. So, the bill was crazy. But the bill was supported by the far left, and you could get a constituency to support each part of this. And I think it could have passed had not, number one, inflation hadn't been as bad as it is, and number two, that Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, had not had such a backbone. Some people say that he'll speak one way, but when push comes to shove, he'll actually cave to his party. But I don't think so this time.
No, I don't, and I've seen that in person, right? And I was a West Virginian for many years, and I've seen that time and time again. I was bracing for it this entire time. And I think if we can get through the new year, that threat will have passed.
I think it's already there.
I think so.
Yeah.
But there's that little thing in the back of my head that says, just be careful. I think we're ready. I think we're good.
Don't count on it.
Let me come to you, because one of the things they were talking about is advancing racial and gender equity through employment inclusiveness. So you not only have climate change in here, you not only have the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare, and you have all sorts of bookkeeping trickery and even providing tax credits for journalists, but you also have the advancement of the CRT, which, as I said, and you said just a few minutes ago, is something that is not a real good campaign issue to be running on in 2022.
Look, I'm kind of speechless with all this stuff. It comes so fast and furious. It seems so obvious when you're lectured about, reality by people who will deny the presence of two genders and admit that there are 35 or 100 or whatever there might be that refer to people as pregnant people instead of mom. It's hard to take it very seriously at all. except that it's so serious.
Yes.
Right? And that it just keeps on coming. I'm encouraged by the pushback we're seeing at the school board level of parents coming in saying, okay, I've put up with enough of your crazy. I'm not doing any more of this. You've gone too far. I saw a woman in, I think it was Los Angeles this week, who confronted the school board angrily about trying to convert her daughter into a transgendered person. And she said, you robbed me of that opportunity to care for my kid in a hard time. You had no right to do that. And thank goodness, it shouldn't take us that much to get to that point, but at least we've gotten to that point. But now we've got this, we can't even call it pork anymore. It's something, it's like the whole pork farm is there, right? the entire, and if you've ever been to a pig farm, I mean, all of that has piled in with it. It smells the high heaven here. And yet we somehow think that this is glorious, that we're doing some sort of great thing. It's not. It's not solving a thing. The left has fully converted politics into religion. And they are now requiring us to bow to sacraments that they require. You saw it in President Biden's response to the tornado, where he kind of likened it to some sort of judgment of Mother Earth upon us here for our sins of global warming, in fossil fuels and reliance and that sort of thing. There is no mercy to this God of the leftist politics. There is no forgiveness to the leftist God of politics. There is no grace whatsoever to those that are on the left here that are demanding you, take the communion of abortion and keep on going down the line of all the crazy, bizarre leftist rituals that are out there that in ages past would be, I think, historians in the future may look back as akin to the bygone era of tossing virgins into volcanoes. I mean, we're getting to the point of absurdity by the left. Unfortunately, we're not far enough yet because people actually view this as sort of reasonable. And I don't know what to tell you other than you're looking at crazy people that are trying to govern our country and say, no, that lake is dry when you jump in and come out soaking wet. They're telling you that the sky is blue or the sky is green when it's evidently blue. There is no objectivity anymore. I've gone on too long of a rant here. I think the point is made. It's impossible to respond to these people other than to say, no, I'm not going to engage you at all. You're crazy.
Let me just mention, we're going to take a break. We come back and have a lot more to cover, but one of the things we've encouraged you to do is light a candle, and that's one of the things I've been talking about over the last couple of days. You certainly, I hope, will consider what you might do to support this ministry, and also First Liberty. We have that link there as well, and as we said, we have a match on the table, so if you want to make a gift, it will be matched dollar for dollar, but we have a lot more to cover, and we have a lot to talk about still, so we'll do that right after these important messages.
Have you ever been in a pitch black room when someone lit a candle? The change from darkness to visibility is instant, but what's even better is when that one small flame is used to light other candles. Before long, a room that was completely dark is radiating with light. That's what happens when you share the truth. Just like that small flame, your light is contagious, and it's needed in America today. Did you know that most Americans still identify as Christians? But here's the scary part. Only 9% of those people actually understand biblical teachings, according to findings by researchers. You could say that America is the dark room. Will you be the person to light a candle? Here's how you can spread that light even farther. When you give to Point of View, you'll equip millions of others with the tools they need to stand for truth. And any gift before December 31st will be matched up to $75,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, it is our weekend edition. Penna, Dexter, Jeremy Dice with us. And I thought we'd talk about the Constitution for just a minute. I'm holding up our little booklet here on constitutional interpretation. Might just mention, for those of you that actually are one of our Truth Team members, pretty soon we will be mailing out one on church and state. Now, we don't claim to be lawyers, but we can't let First Liberty have all the fun here. But nevertheless, we from time to time try to educate you on those issues. And I thought I would go back to firstliberty.org, because there's a news article here in which it says that the commission put together by President Biden faces a major obstacle, and that is the Constitution. And Penna, Dexter, we've talked about this before. There has been a desire to try to add more justices to the Supreme Court. You have Senator Elizabeth Warren saying finally, after a great deal of soul searching, she's finally come to a conclusion she didn't want to come to, and that is the need that we need to put 4 more justices on the court. Why 4? Because then that would switch the decision she doesn't like. And so I thought it was interesting that after 6 months of deliberation, the commission finally said, you know, there is a real big obstacle. Seems to be the Constitution.
And they figured that out during all those weeks and months. Well, what happened was, of course, we talked a lot about court packing and what a major threat that would be if that were ever to become just our policy. I mean, it really makes the court into a political institution. But even if you didn't pack the court by adding more justices, there are a lot of other things that could be done, like term limits, for instance. And I think we've talked about it, Jeremy, but you wrote a piece that I saw on your website about this obstacle, the Constitution. And there were a couple things mentioned that I'd never heard before. Well, number one was splitting the court into senior and junior justices. What is that all about?
Yeah, I mean, this is a clever way of getting around the senior justices who happen to be the conservative justices, right? I mean, and every one of these things, by the way, is like they're trying really hard to kick Justice Thomas out the door without kicking Justice Thomas out the door. But that's what they're doing. So what they said is they'll say, "Oh, okay, we'll split these justices into senior justices and junior justices. The senior ones will hear only the original jurisdiction cases, and the other ones will hear the appellate jurisdiction of the court." Okay, this takes a little bit of lawyering for you to remember here. There are only a few things that the Supreme Court has what's called original jurisdiction. Cases can be filed and should be filed only at the Supreme Court. Everything else comes through an appeal. So it starts at the district court, then it goes to the appeals court, then it goes to the Supreme Court. The circuit court is in between. Anyway, so there are very few, like, matters of admiralty, whether or not you've got ships that are, lawfully operating within our maritime quadrants here. Those are the kinds of things that are, so there are like 1-2 cases a year that may go to the Supreme Court under original jurisdiction matters. There are some other things here that kind of come up once in a while, but it is so very rare. I'd have to actually go look it up in Article 3 to remember what they actually are for original jurisdiction cases. So that's not going to be the case there. The appellate jurisdiction ones are all the rest of the cases. So all the other cases in which the court does not have original jurisdiction would be the ones that the junior justices, it's just very convenient that the junior justices happen to be largely occupied by the left. I mean, there are others here too. You got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett that are junior as well. But there's no saying that the old ones would be put into the former. They could divide up however they want. So anybody nominated by a conservative president, a Republican president, could become a senior justice all of a sudden, and anybody who is appointed by someone that the left likes could be a junior. I mean, it is just laughable how the left is trying to get even on the term limits thing. It was a great line in the report itself. In term limits seem kind of like they appeal kind of on the surface, but they're not really that great once you dig down into it. Especially because it's really hard to figure out how to do it. Because who gets kicked out first? All the current justices have lifetime tenure. Do you wait around for them to retire or die? That's one option. Do you decide to start staggering them based upon how they came in? Well, who came in first? Well, here we go again. It's Justice Thomas again. So there are these kind of thinly veiled, but not quite so thinly veiled efforts to get rid of the most conservative justice on the Supreme Court, and so that they can accomplish their ideological ends. And that's exactly where this is trying to head, is that the left is just absolutely hot and bothered by the fact that the putative conservatives rule the court. Now, I think there's some reason to think that that's not exactly true. There's not 9 Thomases on this court. There's not even 4 Thomases on this court. There may not even be 3 Thomases on this court. And so it's not like this wild and crazy conservative, but when you're advocating, you're calling calling mothers pregnant people and encouraging people to kill their own children and identify as 45 other genders, anything that says, yeah, there's a man and there's a woman, and yeah, that seems to be radically conservative today. And that's, I think, where the left is right now.
Well, we felt like this commission did not really recommend court packing. Maybe that issue is not such a hot issue anymore. But Elizabeth Warren then kind of, brought it back up again. So is it going to come back? Is it going to go away? Will it come back? Will we forget about the idea of court packing for a few decades?
No, I think so. There's a bill already before this too by a guy by the name of Hank Johnson, and I forgot Jerry Nadler also co-sponsored this, and now Elizabeth Warren is as well. Because who is their base? Their base is the very far left in all 3 of those situations, and they're trying to appease the far left on these things. No, so the commission, or maybe I should put it more broadly, the political left has not declared an armistice on this issue. They've just kind of agreed to a ceasefire. We're now kind of on the demilitarized zone, right? And there are 2 sides that are both arming that border, whatever that was, the 35th parallel. Both sides have their armies there just in case. There's mines everywhere that anybody could step on at any moment. And so it's a bit of a detente that we're at right now, and everybody's kind of hiding behind shrubberies, trying to figure out who's going to shoot at them next. And that doesn't need to be the case, but that's where we're at. And so the war could restart at any moment, and it could go nuclear very fast. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we hold back any further invasion by the left into these matters of court packing or term limits or any other kind of court reform. Because what they're after, remember, this commission was supposed to be talking about court packing. Now they've expanded it to court reform. And so what the left really is after is turning this institution towards their political ends, remaking it in a way that the founding fathers didn't want. And thankfully, the Constitution is fending off those attacks.
Well, again, if you'd like to read the piece by Jeremy Dice, you can simply go to firstliberty.org. New battlefront for court packing. Biden's commission faces major obstacle, the Constitution. And so it is there on their website. And again, as I've said before, you might want to support that organization as well. They have a match on the table, I just found out, and we, of course, have one as well. When we come back from the break, though, I thought we might, since we're talking about the Constitution and also just the future of this republic, Victor Davis Hanson wrote a piece, and it's one of the other articles we've posted. Why is the left suddenly worried about the end of democracy when you have all sorts of things that we have documented on this program in which those people on the left, and we mean the hard left sometimes, not so much the liberals, have done over the last couple of years, but then all of a sudden they're concerned that anything that might be proposed now by even some of their Republican colleagues in the Congress is a threat to the democracy, a threat to the republic. And so we're going to talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
We've all heard the phrase, seeing is believing. Unfortunately, that is no longer true due to the technological advances that make deepfakes so convincing. 2 years ago, I wrote about how you could put someone's face on a video the way you can use Photoshop or Lightroom to put a face on a picture of someone's body. In the past, it took cutting-edge video technology to accomplish this. Now it is readily available and can even be purchased on the internet. Michael Grothaus writes about this in his book, Trust No One, Inside the World of Deep Fakes. His examples are a reminder that you shouldn't even believe everything you see. This technology can make it look like you commit a crime. This journalist asked a deep fake for hire to put together a clip of him committing a crime and was shocked to see how convincing the video was. He watched himself point a gun at a cyclist and told him to give up his backpack or die. It looked like his video-created self would have killed the man if passerbys had not interrupted. Deepfakes have also been used to make an innocent person appear in porn. Actresses like Addison Rae and Scarlett Johansson have been targeted this way through deepfake technology. Although they have tried to fight back, it seems like a losing battle. Now, some of the deep fakes are harmless. You can see Tom Cruise playing golf on TikTok. You can see Queen Elizabeth dancing and even flying through the air. Videos have been made of Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Boris Johnson, and Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, these videos can be manipulated to have you say or do things you would never say or do in real life. They could easily be used to damage your reputation, and you could even lose your job. Sadly, I must agree with the title, Trust No One. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. And it is Weekend Edition. Lots of articles we've posted today, but I've always appreciated Victor Davis Hanson. He's been on the program with us recently when we were talking about his new book. But to understand this one, you have to realize that when he's quoting Hillary Clinton, she said some pretty interesting things this week. He mentions Adam Schiff. Well, you know, we found out that Adam Schiff was doing a presentation on the January 6th committee, in which they had altered some text that were written from actually Jim Jordan to Mark Meadows. Then he mentions Brian Williams, who kind of said goodbye as a broadcaster. So that kind of gives you a context of all this. But Penna, he's really asking a fundamental question. At a time when all these, and let's use a nice charitable word, shenanigans have gone on from the left, why is it now all of a sudden, after all these times, the left's suddenly worried about the end of democracy?
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's because they're worried because they realize that it works, that democracy does work, and so they're worried that it's going to work next November against them, and so they're scrambling, and it just comes from doing so many radical things and one after another, and I was reading last weekend in the Wall Street Journal's kind of weekend section about Venezuela. And when you look at that country and what happened, not only to its courts, they packed the courts there, but economically, they just stole from every citizen across the country. And, they ruined a wealthy country, and they destroyed an industry and all of that. And so, smart people have to look at what's been done ever since the president took power and think that, they're all attacks on democracy, and they've got to be worried that in a democracy, we're going to throw them out.
Well, and again, he's talking about, they don't seem worried about 2 million foreign nationals crashing the border, not worried about formal efforts to dismantle the Constitution and the Electoral College. Of course, we just talked about the issue of court packing and all the rest. Not worried about some of the things that have gone on through the FBI, the Justice Department, the CIA. Not worried about the Pentagon suddenly losing the support of the American people because it's more concerned about white rage or white supremacy, and on and on. He goes through this long list of all things they're not worried about, and it kind of plays back into Jeremy's great comments today. There seems to be a lack of even sanity in our culture, and a lot of that lack of sanity seems to happen within the Beltway in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and look, there's going to be times for you in the coming year to go to town hall meetings and that sort of thing. Your instinct is going to want to be very strong and kind of fight them and yell at them, and that's the wrong play. You do need to go and confront them with the reality, right? And just need to bring them the reality. You won't convince them, but that's not your call to convince them. You'll need to go to them and ask them things, very simple things like, define for me the word woman. And if they can't, show everybody.
Yes.
Define for me child. Tell me what is a parental right. Go through the very basic things. Don't engage in the debate. You will lose. You will lose every time. And so if they want to talk to you about something that is critical race theory or whatever it is, just say no. Right? I mean, you don't have to go through the debate. And if they ask you if you're a racist, you say no. If they ask you if you're not aware of your racism, you say no. You just simply say, no, I'm not going to go down the road of that debate, because if you go down the hole, you will not come back out. So avoid all of that. But you have to go back to these folks and confront them with the reality of what is life. How are you going to pay this bill, right? At some point, we're going to have to pay these bills. How are you going to fight our wars if you're kicking out our soldiers because they've asked for an accommodation for their religious beliefs? What are you doing for that? Are our soldiers meant to fight wars or to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? I mean, and what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does diversity include diversity of religious belief? Right?
So good.
Can you be diverse and hold to a position that is different than the reigning gender orthodoxy? And then ask them to declare in person to you right there, what is marriage? Tell us what is marriage? And if they won't define for you what marriage is, they're not serious people. If they can't tell you what is a man or what is a woman, they're not serious human beings. If they use the phrase pregnant person, they're not a serious person. They're not. They can't be. And don't treat them like they're serious people. Say, you can be very polite because they have a form of a political disability. And so be very kind to them and say thank you, pat them gently on the head, and then turn the other direction and say, we're going to stop listening to you now and find someone who is grounded in reality. You can even pull out a map. And this may be your best way to qualify a candidate for office. Just pull out a globe and hand it to the person and say, point to where we're standing. And if they can point to where you're actually standing, or at least within the state in which you're standing, you can have the next conversation with them about whether or not they can define what a woman actually is. Because they're operating in some different alternate universe from us right now. You and I grew up in a different world than what many of our politicians are living in today. And it's not loving to them to play inside of that reality. It's not real. It's a bizarro universe, if you're familiar with the comics.
Yes.
It's a different world. Don't cater to that. Just simply say thank you. I don't think you're right. In fact, I think you're a little crazy. We're going to go find someone who actually can articulate what a woman actually is. And then that person, that's going to be like step one. Now we can provide a lot more qualifications because that person is actually on this side of the looking glass. and we can have that conversation with them without having to worry about the Queen of Hearts coming to take our heads off. We can have that conversation to find out if that person can actually govern or not. But don't engage the crazy. Just remember the Southern grandma saying, "There, bless your heart," and move on to someone who is actually sane, and let's see if that person can actually govern.
You know, I think one of the things I've said before is 2 years ago, if you asked somebody who their county judge was, they probably couldn't tell you. But with the COVID lockdowns, they figured that out. And I would say even 6 months ago, if you asked people who their school board member was, they probably couldn't tell you. But with all the things happening with critical race theory and transgenderism, the mask mandates, probably can tell you right now. And we've talked about in the past, most people sometimes couldn't tell you who their mayor was until all of a sudden the mayor says, "You know what, we think it's probably better to charge you more for water, or it's probably unlikely that we can let you actually have a Christian school," or well, those kinds of things. So Penna, really sometimes it just involves us getting involved in that local level and paying attention not only to who is running for the U.S. Senate or Congress, or in other years who's running for president. Work your way down there, because some of those individuals are making decisions that affect you and your family.
Yeah, when you look at some of this, I mean, there's something to be said for letting things play out a little bit. And I think with for instance, the whole issue of the defunding of the police across the country, and we've seen the consequences. Well, now in San Francisco, they're actually asking for money for the police to come back, because guess what? There's been all kinds of violence, and there's been all kinds of looting and stealing, and the crime rate is just precipitously gone up, and all of a sudden the mayor wants some more money to get the police back. So if you let some of it, you let it play out. You look at what happened in Virginia, and, it was really McAuliffe making a statement he never should have made. It was stupid, and I'm sure all of his supporters thought so when he said, the parents didn't have any authority over their children, that the schools needed to have that authority, and, he really lost on that, I think. So some of the things can actually, they're so absurd they can defeat them. And the emperor has no clothes, and you kind of have to let that reality sink into people. But, it isn't enough. We do have to fight back, and especially on the local level. I think that's where you have a lot of influence, because not very many people get involved there. And if you either support someone running for school board, or if you run yourself, you are going to make a huge impact, and you're going to help a lot of people.
Yes. When we're talking about the map, and we'll take a break, I was just thinking you could also say, okay, at least you got the right state. Now show me on a map, or on a globe, I guess you'd have to say, where's Ukraine? And you're ready to send American troops to defend the border of Ukraine when we aren't defending our own border, and 2 million people come over the border all the time. And one of the phrases I find myself using more and more is, these are not serious people. So it's interesting Jeremy's talking about that. We've always said you can't make this up, one of our lines, but one of the ones I tend to be using all the time is, when you're worried about diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Department of Homeland Security, and you have 2 million people coming across the border, these are just not serious people. And so that's another point that you need to take. Let me just mention real quickly, when we come back from the break, Penna Dexter has done a very good commentary, which you can also hear in about 15 minutes if you're listening online, The Problem of Passivity. We've got some other commentaries and articles and all sorts of other things to cover. But don't forget, if you want to support this ministry, and I hope that you might, probably you've heard some things today that you agree with and would appreciate, click on that button that says donate, because we have a match on the table, and we certainly need your financial support. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Have you ever been in a pitch black room when someone lit a candle? The change from darkness to visibility is instant. But what's even better is when that one small flame is used to light other candles. Before long, a room that was completely dark is radiating with light. That's what happens when you share the truth. Just like that small flame, your light is contagious, and it's needed in America today. Did you know that most Americans still identify as Christians? But here's the scary part. Only 9% of those people actually understand biblical teachings, according to findings by researchers. You could say that America is the dark room. Will you be the person to light a candle? Here's how you can spread that light even farther. When you give to Point of View, you'll equip millions of others with the tools they need to stand for truth. And any gift before December 31st will be matched up to $75,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter as well as Jeremy Dyson. Let me just mention that we have our Viewpoints commentary. And if you go there, you're going to see the one we're going to be talking about right now with Penna Dexter. If you click on it to read now, you will see also there's a graph that you will, I believe, benefit from in addition to the text. But also there's a place where you can sign up to receive the Viewpoint commentaries. Mine comes to your inbox Monday through Friday. Penna's comes on Saturday, but we also post it right now. And in just a few minutes, for those of you listening on computer or online, you will be able to actually hear the commentary that Penna has done. And it's entitled The Problem of Passivity, and it comes from our friends at the Institute for Family Studies.
Well, that's right. Also, the Wheatley Foundation. And Peggy Noonan wrote about it at the Wall Street Journal. And it was just some interesting things to think about. The title of it is The Divided State of Our Union's Family Formation in Post-COVID-19 America. So they were studying kind of what COVID-19 did to family formation. It said the desire to marry was up a little bit overall in overall categories, not in every category, since the onset of COVID, but while the desire to have a child had dropped. But it talked about the divides, and if you're rich, if you're religious, and you're Republican, and that's the terminology they used in writing up the report, you have a relatively greater propensity to marry than lower income, less religious Americans. And we've been seeing this in a lot of studies. So in a sense, there's good news and bad news, because divorce is down. Teen pregnancy is down. Abortion rates are down. But then when you look at the other side of that, marriage is down. Fewer marriages, of course, is going to mean fewer divorces. Teen sex, pregnancy, and abortion are down, but kids aren't dating anymore. And, some parents will say, oh, that's great. But really, they're not dating. They're not, the social part of their life is being kind of stunted and aborted, and it's not just because of COVID. Jean Twenge, who I know quoted a lot, has she's commented a lot on how social media, cell phones, and a lot of online dating and things like that has actually squelched our kids' social development. And so, this whole problem of passivity was identified here by Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute. And he says that really, social breakdown used to be, we wanted to stop kids from having sex too early. We wanted to stop them from becoming parents too early, all of this, having kids out of wedlock, and those things are problems in the culture, and they still are problems. But we've got another problem now, and that's they're not dating. They're not even tempted to have sex too early because they're not getting together with the opposite sex. They're a little bit risk averse, and so they're not marrying. They're not taking that step to get their life launched. And I've noticed this in a lot of good, even Christian families where their kids, they're kind of, they may be out there working in a job and all of that, but they're not going anywhere with a family life. And we're meant to live in families. And so that's the decline of marriage. And marriage does so much good in a society, and it's really God's plan, that's a real problem for the culture. And of course, the next problem that goes with it is we're not replacing ourselves.
That's right. The
fertility rate is down below the replacement rate. And so, I look back and I think, well, what can we do about this? And I think the answer that the first answer to this is the church. I don't think the church has been speaking into this problem for decades. And I don't think most churches have a real good theology of marriage that they're putting out there to people. And so that would be, my first solution, which is how I ended the commentary. And I think it's something also that parents have and can help inculcate into their children. I mean, some families just don't. They're worried about their child being successful in a career and getting a good education. And yeah, they'd love to see them get married, but that doesn't always happen in a vacuum. And so parents need to sort of begin to prepare their children for that. And so, it's the problem of passivity. And millennials have a lot of a lot of that, and it's really a big problem.
Pathologies of unruliness and disordered passivity. You know, one of the things we have talked about on the program before is there is an incredible fertility gap because conservatives have more babies than liberals, Christians have more babies than secularists. But this whole phenomenon of COVID-19 and all of the rest, you have individuals now that are not going to church. You know, I've been doing these surveys. We did a survey at Probe, and I've been doing all these interviews, and I say a lot of that is just the Field of Dreams myth. If you build it, they will come. We built 350,000 churches, and they're not coming. I mean, they're staying home, and they're not getting out there to that. But the bigger issue, as you point out, we need to, first of all, have churches and pastors and Sunday school leaders and even parents talking about the value of marriage, talk about the value of family, the importance of family formation at a time when sometimes we're afraid to do that because, Jeremy, as we've pointed out, if you even try to define what a woman is, going to get you in trouble. If you define what marriage is, it's going to get you in trouble. But we need to stand counterculture to some of those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, and Penna pointed out to me in the break, if someone asks you to identify your preferred pronouns, say no. I mean, if you really want to have fun with it, then you say Your Majesty and His Excellency. But you can just simply not participate
Don't go along with
in
it.
this. No, they are not serious persons on this. They're not seriously human beings, I mean, on this issue. They want to be taken very seriously. They want to appear very intelligent. It's not intelligent. It is the same analysis as the king's new clothes. The king was naked, or the emperor. He was naked. He was stark naked, but he thought he had these glorious robes on him. He didn't. He had his entire body bared to the public. That is what's going on here as well. They are baring their backsides to you by saying, tell me your preferred pronouns. They can't even articulate proper grammar. We can't trust them to articulate proper policy on things. Don't take them seriously.
So again, this is a piece, Penna, that reminds us again that we also talk about marriage and family and child rearing and all the rest. We do programs on it, but that has to be, I think, front and center in the church, because again, we recognize that young people today get much more information off of a screen. Again, the Kaiser Family Foundation indicates that the average Generation Y, Generation Z probably spends 8 hours to 10 hours a day in front of a screen. That could be a computer screen, a video screen, a movie screen, or it could be a screen on their phone. And you say, okay, maybe it's just 10 hours a day. That's 70 hours a week. And you are trying to counteract that with a 45-minute sermon? Guess who wins? So we, first of all, can't assume that even 45 minutes is going to do a good job, but it's certainly not going to do a good job if we stay off the obvious topics. And a lot of people just are afraid to talk about this because, well, I don't want to talk about marriage because I don't want to hurt the feelings of people that maybe are single or divorced. Well, even divorced people say it's probably good that you talk about the value of marriage. We don't want to talk about homosexuality because, after all, we might have somebody who's got a friend, neighbor, coworker, family member that's homosexual. We don't even want to talk about the issue of sex before marriage and cohabitation because, after all, we know some of the kids in the youth group are living together. We're not talking about anything except sort of feel-good theology, and I think we need to change that, don't you think?
Yeah, you're not doing them any good. I remember back when I was single and I passed 25, and the ladies in the church were all trying to match me up. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. The ladies in the church are trying to match me up with a single, young men, eligible guys in the church, and all of that. And I think we need maybe a little more of that. We need a little bit of pressure, and also the fear that we have for calling out cohabitation. It's not good for these couples. I've seen, I was just with some family members, and they're going on 5 and 6 years dating someone, and they're in their early 30s, and you're like, get on with it. What are you waiting for? What are you doing? But the reality is sometimes the marriage doesn't turn out so well if you just kind of fall into marriage from 5 or 6 years of living and sleeping together.
Yeah,
so we need to turn things back in order.
You don't slouch towards loving someone.
Right.
I tell young men, I'm now of the age that young men actually come to me for advice on occasion.
Because you're still young enough for that.
Well, maybe. And I'm also old enough for it as the gray hairs reveal in my beard. Not on my head, on my beard. But these boys are more like the pajama boy from the Obama decade than they are John Wayne. And we need a lot less pajama guy and much more John Wayne in our life here. And maybe John Wayne is too far in one direction. Okay, I can grant you that. But we've gone way too close to a pajama guy, pajama boy, whatever he is, than is comfortable for us. And we have these young heads full of mush that are still scratching out, do you like me, with a checkbox next to yes or no and handing it to their girlfriends. Man up, love that woman, and love her for the rest of your life. I mean, tell her that you do so. And see if it's actually reciprocated. Why don't you try this as a countercultural, wonderful idea? Be committed to one woman for the rest of your life.
What a concept.
And love the children that you procreate with her.
Yeah.
And stay faithful there. It will be, you want to change the world?
Yep.
Do that, and then tuck them in at night.
Yes, you're good. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we've sort of been talking about don't conform to the world. And one of our pieces is climate change conformists, but I think it has applications even beyond climate change. We'll talk about that right after this.
The Institute for Family Studies and the Wheatley Foundation published a report about Americans' attitudes regarding marriage and child-rearing. Its title is The Divided State of Our Union, Family Formation in Post-COVID-19 America. It shows the desire to marry has ticked up a bit overall since the onset of COVID, while the desire to have a child dropped. But the study reveals deepening economic, religious, and partisan divides in family formation, and describes the reasons the rich, the religious, and Republicans have a relatively greater propensity to marry than lower-income, less religious Americans. Downward trends in divorce, teen pregnancy, and abortion rates continue, but there's a certain disturbing disengagement behind some of this. Fewer marriages translate to fewer divorces. Teen sex, pregnancy, and abortion happily are down, but so is teen dating. Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute explains that contemporary social science, including this report, reveals a change in the basic character of social breakdown in America. For generations, the core problem has been Americans living their lives out of order, having sex too soon, becoming parents too early, without restraint or preparation. He calls these pathologies of unruliness. We have added another pathology, disordered passivity. In an article at the Dispatch, Yuval Levin writes, there is less social disorder, we might say, because there is less social life. We are doing less of everything together, so that what we do is a little more tidy and controlled. Our society possesses institutions of restraint on our impulses. Marriage channels and domesticates human longings. Now we must ask, what if we fail to act on our longings to begin with? Many young people are risk-averse, waiting too long, maybe forever, to get on with it. A terrible result is the decline of marriage and the decline of childbearing. The church must speak into this passivity. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and again, we're going to do a kind of a summary, but I thought I'd mention one others, and that is, of course, we have our booklet on the whole issue of climate change, and if you don't have a copy, I don't even claim that we can, in about 10 minutes, talk about all the issues, but I'll give you just a few things to begin to think about. But this last article was written actually by Peter Wood. I called it Climate Change Conformist. Now, the first page, if you read it, says this has nothing to do with climate change. because what he's really talking about is it doesn't take a lot of courage to go along. And it doesn't take a lot of courage to say, well, the latest tornadoes in Kentucky were due to climate change. The president says that. Everybody else says that. The news media says that. And what we're talking about here is the need, Penna, sometimes to not only have discernment, a key word we've been using all this year, but also to have courage. You know, we've talked about live not by lies. And it sounds like you're really taking a stand when you go along with some of the current fads and philosophies and ideas. But what he's pointing out is that really the problem is that too many people just simply want to go along, or they don't want to get called out. So if somebody starts talking about race or gender or anything, they just sort of put their heads down, hope they don't get called on, don't get called out. And we're just going to have to honestly say that there is a serious problem right now in a need for, in this case, scientists who know better. In the case of when we talk about COVID, maybe doctors who know better. And of course, when we talk about issues like gender, all of us that know better, that some of the things that are being told right now are just flat wrong, and we need to speak out against them.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the climate, it's used... climate problems like tornadoes that just happened are used to advance an agenda. And, everything falls into place with that agenda unless you have a brave or courageous or bold scientist that calls it out. And that's what we need more of that in so many areas, but the climate is probably one of the big ones. And it's just another encouragement, I think, for people to have courage. Courage is lacking, and we need more of it.
He's also sent something in the second page here, because we last week played a piece in which we talked about Stephen Koonin. You might not know who he is, but he wrote a book called Unsettled, in which he's really challenged the whole issue of climate change. And he's actually received even stronger denunciations because, after all, he was a person that was Caltech. He was the vice president of Caltech. He served as an undersecretary for science in the Obama administration. So that's almost worse. And we can certainly think of another example. It's one thing for an African American to not go along with critical race theory. It's quite another to be Clarence Thomas or some of the other people like Ben Carson. You get vilified even more so because you've actually strayed from the reservation.
Yeah, absolutely. But I sure would like to be vilified like Clarence Thomas. Like that's the camp I want to be in.
Yes.
Well, and I don't understand people who want to not be in that camp. Right? I don't really care to go along with the culture that has to have 14 genders listed on an application and have 4 different pronouns for you to use when I can just simply say, I'm a man. I mean, how do you not know that? I mean, this is very obvious things. Welcome to the world of reality. This is just Earth. It's not that hard to figure out. Look, climate change is going to be a perpetual debate because it's very difficult to trace its origination. More than likely, it's something very natural to things, but you're exactly right, Kerby. It is a grand opportunity for the left especially to try to harness the political compassion that comes with natural disasters and sort of this human impetus for wanting to have some sort of response to something, to do something in the face of something or other. But we are not ruled by the world around us. We rule the world. And there are going to be catastrophes from now until the Lord returns. That has always been the case as soon as Eve took the bite of the apple, or whatever fruit it was. That has been the case forever, and it will always be the case. That we are held as somehow under the thumb by the left as the people responsible for it all. It certainly is not gracious. It's not kind to do that. Now, do we go around trashing the environment? Of course not. You obey what Grandma said. You pick up after yourself. You take your trash to the trash can. You drive reasonably. You use reasonable amounts of stuff. You don't become extravagant at these things and try to pad your cell with all these different things that you need to have. The material. focus on something other than yourself for a little while, and this world will get a lot better.
That certainly seems like it. We only have a few minutes left, and I thought we might just again mention that we've posted a lot of these articles, Penna's commentary, but I did want to maybe come back to maybe some prayer targets, and one of those is, Jeremy, for the people that weren't with us at the very beginning, you have one oral argument that's already been given to the Supreme Court. Next week in Fort Worth, I believe, you have some arguments, and so those are some very important prayer targets.
Yeah, this is a very important case. It's going to make a big difference for our men and women in uniform. This is 35 Navy SEALs that we represent. Some of them may even be called to testify. I don't know that that's going to be the case or not. The Navy wants to out who they are, and we're saying, no, you're not allowed to do that for a lot of reasons, and especially because you want to kick them out of the Special Warfare Unit. We don't want to give you that chance. But more importantly, it's on this mandate that is being questioned right now. And if we're successful, that will protect the religious rights of men and women in the armed forces all the way across the board, not just for the Navy SEALs, but for all of them. And that's certainly the goal. All the other mandates have fallen by the wayside. My hope will be that Judge Reed O'Connor, who will be hearing the debate on Monday, will rule in our favor. So as you're thinking about it, Monday morning about 9:30 Central Time, there will be arguments taking place in a federal court in Texas that would very much benefit from your prayers on that. This is not a slam dunk case by any stretch of the imagination. And even when this case is done at the district court, it's going to be appealed to the Fifth Circuit and eventually to the Supreme Court. Those prayers are mighty and effective, and so we covet them from you.
One of the things that we also might want to talk about, in addition to the military, is that you have your First Liberty Live. And you just this last Thursday, which is yesterday, had another good piece on that, because we want to celebrate those individuals that have served in the military, want to thank them, and want to support them. So if people have somebody that's a military person or person that has served in the military in the past, they could go to First Liberty Live, right?
That's right.
.com, right?
.com, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, I want to make sure I don't get it in the wrong spot there.
Yeah, and you got to, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet because I was busy doing other things, but I understand Jerry Boykin was on that show, the founder of Delta Group. So you talk about a guy who understands special forces pretty well. This guy does. And as I understood from my colleagues, he was extremely moving when it comes to talking about the special warfare units and their commitment to a variety of things. And he speaks even into camera directly to them and as a word of encouragement. So I think you'd be well served to go to firstlibertylive.com and watch that episode.
Real quickly, too, you also have the Alaska flight attendants. You still have Coach Kennedy. I get that question more than anybody else, and those are still in process, right?
That's right. We'll actually be filing one more piece, one more brief. Right December 30th, I think, is the deadline for that case to be fully briefed before the Supreme Court, and then the court can determine whether or not they're going to hear it. We certainly hope so. We would welcome your prayers on that as well. It's a critical case for public school employees, including coaches all over the country, and generally free exercise. If you can pray in public and be seen, is that okay? That's kind of the narrow question there. So please pray for that. We've got another case that the court has held over on review for a long time involving a little church in Virginia. And it's a book of church order. It's a Presbyterian church, and whether or not the ministers qualify. We're hoping that signals good things, but we would pray that we'd ask you to pray to that end as well.
Again, you can go to firstliberty.org to find out about that. You can sign up to be First Liberty Insider, and that's a good resource. And so, again, they are certainly needing your financial support. And Penna, Dexter, we've been around for a few years, and we know how Point of View needs financial support before the end of the year.
This is a good time to ask and a good time to pray about what you can do to be part of that.
All of it is available at our website, pointofview.net, and I hope that you appreciated some of the things we've covered. Even though we will be off next Friday, we'll be on Monday through Thursday, so I hope you'll join us then. Firstly, I'll want to thank Andrew for his help as an engineer, Steve for his help as a producer. Enjoy your weekend, celebrate Christmas, and we'll see you back here on Monday on Point of View.
Have you ever been in a pitch black room when someone lit a candle? The change from darkness to visibility is instant. But what's even better is when that one small flame is used to light other candles. Before long, a room that was completely dark is radiating with light. That's what happens when you share the truth. Just like that small flame, your light is contagious, and it's needed in America today. Did you know that most Americans still identify as Christians? But here's the scary part. Only 9% of those people actually understand biblical teachings, according to findings by researchers. You could say that America is the dark room. Will you be the person to light a candle? Here's how you can spread that light even farther. When you give to Point of View, you'll equip millions of others with the tools they need to stand for truth. And any gift before December 31st will be matched up to $75,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.